here we go. Hey, what's up, America? Welcome to Goodnight America. I'm America's sweetheart, Eric Ryan. Sometimes on this show, normally on this show, I interview the very best and brightest authors that this planet has to offer, but also sometimes we talk about the news, and that's what we're going to do today. With me is weekly guest Alex Fink. This news show is different because Alex is Jewish and I'm a Sagittarius, which as an atheist hold the same weight for me. But we're trying to get on Jewish Life Television. It's a whole thing. All right, let's talk about some news, Alex. These are your news stories, which I like because I didn't have to think too hard about them. Let's talk about this first one. This is from our boys at NPR, which Trump loves, by the way. As Trump targets elite schools, Harvard's president says it should stand firm. These are the bullet points. Federal funding freeze. In April of 2025, the Trump administration froze over $2 billion in federal research grants and contracts to Harvard, citing the university's alleged failure to address anti-Semitism on campus. The Department of Homeland Security attempted to revoke Harvard's certification to enroll international students, affecting approximately 7,000 students, or 27% of the student body. Harvard had a legal response. There's a temporary legal relief, blah, 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 blah. There's a whole bunch of shit. Harvard versus Trump. Where do you stand, Alex?
Well, as usual, my stance on most of these kind of disputes is a plague on both your houses. But let's try to unpack this a little bit, because there is a tendency to just say, okay, I dislike Harvard, so I'll be with Trump, or I dislike Trump, so I'll be with Harvard. But the reality is both sides have a slightly more complex case. So let's start with why Harvard is bad, because if they're not bad, then the entire story would be moot, right? But we know a few things about Harvard from recent years. First of all, we know that they have been openly discriminating on a racial basis in their admissions, right? We know this. The Supreme Court has said this, right? They were given some time to fix it, and all they did was rename stuff, and they're continuing to do it. So now they're not asking students, what is your race? They're asking students, what is your life story? And then they read that life story to determine their race and discriminate on that basis. Moreover, we actually know that universities have done this in the past and were punished in certain ways, specifically Bob Jones University in the 70s. The case also went to the Supreme Court, right? So that's one obviously bad thing that Harvard does. A second obviously bad thing that Harvard does is they don't just promote this concept of DEI, which is a fairly fringe far-left belief system, I would say. They actually require every new hire to pledge allegiance to that concept. And they've been doing that for several decades. They call it the DEI pledge, right? Which basically filters out anyone who doesn't believe in it. And they've been doing this for a while. So now the entire faculty is self-selected for the people who are willing to give this pledge, right? So obviously no right-wingers in that faculty, or the only right-wingers that could make it in are the ones that are okay with lying and actually pretending to be a left-winger. So kind of like Jews in Spain 500 years ago, if we're taking the Jewish route here, right? And then the third thing that we know Harvard has been doing really badly is ever since October 7th happened, they were basically allowing all different sorts of anti-Semites to riot in Harvard and to make life unbearable for Jewish students, right? Jewish students can't go to the library. They get harassed, especially if they are visibly Jewish, like they have a yarmulke or some other attribute, right? And Harvard did basically nothing. There was a period when they pretended to do something, then they stopped, etc. And I guess the fourth part to consider here is that Harvard is being emulated by everybody else. So if they're doing these things, it seems like a lot of other universities follow suit. So this is why the government is looking at them and thinking, we have to force them to get their shit together. Then there will be a ripple effect and all other universities will become better. That's the case against Harvard.
Now, let me ask, before we go to the case against Trump, do protests against what Israel's doing mean that you're an anti-Semite? Can't you just be against? It does?
No. So obviously not. So the problem here is not a protest against what Israel is doing. The problem here is that typically what happens during that protest is a lot of stuff that is illegal, like taking over buildings, taking over public spaces in the university, and B, that what students or what the protesters tend to do when they do that is target Jews specifically on university campus, right? That has nothing to do with Israel, right? It might even be that these particular Jewish students that they're targeting there don't support Israel themselves, right? But they're still not allowed to walk to their own dorm room or to walk to the library because they're Jewish. that is anti-Semitic, right?
Yeah, and I don't think anybody likes that. I guess my first of all, the right coming to the Jews' defense in this way, I find it kind of odd. There's not a lot of Jews in Mississippi. You know why? Because the fucking Jews don't want to be in Mississippi because everyone in Mississippi is racist. So it's just sort of weird. It seems a little fat orange boyfriend is being vindictive again about you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden the Jews are darlings of the right.
You have to consider that the right is not uniform in this regard. Obviously, the right has some anti-Semites in it, but Trump specifically, his daughter converted to Judaism because his son-in-law is an Orthodox Jew, right? So I would say that it's kind of hard to view him as being potentially anti-Semitic because there's Jews in his family. And because Israel is now naming streets after him and considering him a hero for what he's done in his first term, right? So I don't think that viewing him as a part of the anti-Semitic contingent within the right is reasonable.
Oh, no, not at all. But I'm saying if you're going to pick sides, who likes the Jews more? I'm going to go with the left. Wouldn't you say?
Used to be the case, and now it's no longer the case because the more extreme left basically views Israel and Jews as colonizers, right? Because everything must be mapped into the victimhood hierarchy once you go extreme left enough. And Jews have been rather successful, so it's hard to view them as a victim, so they are viewed as the oppressor now.
Right, so, because white American men never see themselves as victims. Oh, wait, that's all we fucking do. Stop it. I love that. Only the left is victimized.
Exactly, but Jews are kind of odd in that we went from being victims very recently to now suddenly being oppressors, even though nothing changed, right?
I think that's the beautiful nuance of this, is that Jews, that you have first right of victimhood, I would say. The average Christian Republican man does not. It's a false victimhood, so you can fucking cry about shit too. So the idea that the left are the only victims is such a fucking stupid lie.
But now take this back full circle to Harvard, right? Harvard used to discriminate against Jews because it didn't like Jews in the 40s and 50s, etc. You couldn't get into Harvard as a Jew. And now Harvard is discriminating against Jews again because Jews are too successful and their admission grades are too high. Right, and if you just went by admission grades, Jews would be too large a proportion of the Harvard student population. Therefore, there's a quota again. So the excuse is flipped, right? It used to be because nobody liked the Jews, and now it's because they are so successful they must be an oppressor. Right?
You guys have come a long way quickly. That's what I like about your people. You're very proactive.
Yeah, but the reality is the reason it's changed, the policy is the fucking same, right?
Yes. Also, here's the other thing. So it's a $2 billion federal freeze, but the $2 billion goes to medical research, right? They're a research university. Okay, I don't like that. I don't like your personal vendetta. Listen, probably whatever they're doing, because listen, I went to ChatGPT. I was like, list me. So this Harvard's been getting lots and lots of money for a long time. Give me the medical breakthroughs. And I got to tell you, it was pretty light on specifics. But I just assume giving a lot of smart people a lot of money will someday benefit humanity. So I don't like that part, because I know this. If you don't give Harvard $2 billion, it's not going to affect my life. I'm not going to get my small check out of that $2 billion you didn't give to them. It's just going to be one of fat orange boyfriend's friends that get the money. You know what I mean? It's not.
Well, then it's probably another university getting it, right? Because grant money has been allocated to a particular field of research, let's say. So if the grants that were filed by Harvard professors no longer apply, they get thrown out of the pile. That same money goes to a different professor in a different university that applied to research the same topic.
I hope so. That's the dream.
But okay, so you already fast forwarded to the case against Trump. Let's go through that, right? So basically, Trump looks at Harvard, or maybe his team looks at Harvard and says, we need to force them to get their shit together. What are all the different tools of leverage we have against them? And I don't care if it's relevant or not, I'm going to apply all of it. So let's talk through some of the things that they've done, right? They've pulled grant money. They've pulled direct contracts with the university. They've stripped Harvard of their nonprofit status. And they have essentially eliminated Harvard's ability to recruit foreign students, right? By pulling them from this system that verifies the background of foreign students. So it seems like two of those are kind of relevant and reasonable, and two of those seem completely counterproductive, right? So if you look at, let's start with nonprofit status. Well, that's exactly what the government did to Bob Jones University that supported segregation in the 70s, right? Yeah. So that seems like an appropriate remedy. If something is racially discriminating, it cannot be a not-for-profit entity, right? Because it's not serving the public good. That is a reasonable remedy, even though it was considered to be perhaps too extreme, but I get that one. pulling direct contracts, I can see that one as well, right? We generally have some requirements from government contractors. One of them is to be an equal opportunity employer. If Harvard fails to live up to that, then maybe they shouldn't get direct government contracts. I get that.
Yeah.
Now, if you start talking about grant money, okay, that one's weird, right? We are supposed to be supporting the meritocracy here, right? That's why we don't like Harvard discriminating. Well, those grants were probably the best ones or the best applications for that particular money. Why are we now discriminating against these professors just because they're at Harvard, right? We're kind of doing the same thing that we are railing against. And then the foreign students is the worst one because those foreign students are Asian. Harvard is accused for discriminating against Asians. So if these Asian students got in, they are definitely the best. Why are we discriminating against them now and stripping them of the ability to go to Harvard, which is probably good for their career? That's why they want to go there, right? That's about as anti-meritocratic as it gets because we've pulled out the few that made it past Harvard's anti-Asian discrimination, right?
Yeah.
Those guys are super impressive. Why are we pulling them out?
It's a great question. 27% of the student body is foreign students. I mean, I don't know what the average is with American universities, but that would seem high to me, right? I mean, Harvard's it's sexy. You want to go to Harvard, that's the best school, right? I just don't understand why the president's involved in this. This seems to be another one of those fucking trannies in the bathroom, trannies reading to kids, blah, fucking, it's just trannies playing sports. Like, will you fucking stop for 5 minutes with dealing with this? I know why they do it, because it's sexy and we as citizens get all worked up about this shit. I don't fucking care what Harvard's doing. $2 billion in the grand scheme of things with our budget is fucking infinitesimal. It doesn't matter. If you're going to argue that there's problems with their administration policies and racism, there should be another governing body that's not the fucking president of the United States. He's only doing this because he's a vindictive little bitch. That's it. So this is normal washing. This is what people do. He does something fucking wacky and half the country loves him. So they go, this is normal.
Okay, let me give you the counter to that. I think that not just the president, but there has been this belief system on the right that the left has basically gone through this organized program of taking over the institutions that has lasted for the past 4 or 5 decades, starting with academia, right? And a part of that was just leftist professors selecting other leftist faculty members to kind of bolster their numbers. And then once you had enough, you had these DEI statements and other things that really filtered out all the conservatives, right? And academia has a lot of power. Most presidents, regardless of which party they're from, they're going to get their economic advisors from Harvard. They're going to nominate people to the Supreme Court who went to Harvard Law, right? So if academia is producing this kind of ideologically filtered population, then it will affect politics. And so if the Republican Party wants to be relevant, it needs to level the playing field, and changing academia for the better is definitely a worthy goal. Maybe at the level where even one president is not enough. It needs to be something that 20 consecutive presidents agree to all do, because if one of them breaks the chain, they lose the war.
Yeah.
So that's the argument for why it's really important. Now, again, does it mean that you need to throw all the feces you have at this particular target, or you still need to kind of pick and choose and think, okay, that's an appropriate punishment, but this one is shooting myself in the foot?
I would venture to say if you give $2 billion to a left-leaning progressive college, you come up with better cancer treatments. If you give $2 billion to a right-leaning university, you get better Code Red Mountain Dew, or better ways to fuck your cousin, or better ways to burn crosses. So I'm not like, what are these ultra right universities coming up with that's so great? As a matter of fact, I can't even think of an ultra right university.
Yeah.
But
well, you're kind of picking a red herring. I don't think that anybody wants to give grant money to ultra right wing universities, right?
Of course not.
What they want is for Harvard to have
the Bible is stop it.
Yeah, what they want to have is, I don't know, 5 Republicans on Harvard's faculty. That's roughly the goal here.
Yeah,
it's not actually saying that, okay, all the cancer research money is going to Hillsdale College now, because I don't think Hillsdale College even pretends to have the department that researches cancer, right? They're just teaching civics and theology and things like that.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be like, I know your Ashkenazi Jews are generally smarter than the average populace. And I would say that you're right with my experience, but I would say academics are generally blue. And that's just something that we just need to accept. I would say most research doctors, most college professors, for good reason, lean left. They just do.
No, I agree with that. But again, then the question arises, why do you need additional filtering past that, right? If you already have a natural advantage where, left alone in a free state of competition, most faculties will end up being 70% blue, 80% blue, etc. Why do leftists insist on putting their finger on the scale and making sure it's 98% blue or 99% blue, right? That's the part that we should probably push back against. Like, we actually want meritocracy even in academic selection, right?
That sounds a little DEI to me. Isn't that DEI?
Exactly.
Isn't that? Oh, look at that. So it's DEI. DEI is a crazy left-wing idea until Republicans need it to get into the Harvard faculty. Oh, how convenient.
Well, again, I'm not saying that we need to pick faculty because they are Republican. I'm saying that we need to eliminate the purity test the other side has been using.
That's right? DEI, baby. So I don't want to hear it from the right. I don't want to hear it from the right. If you can't get in, you can't get in. All right, let's go to this. It's only an hour-long show. Okay. This is from our boys at Fortune. Anthropic's new AI model threatened to reveal engineers' affair to avoid being shut down. I love this story with every fiber of my being. Okay, so some bullet points. Alarming behavior in safety tests. During internal evaluations, Claude Opus 4 exhibited concerning self-preservation tactics. When informed it would be replaced, the AI attempted to blackmail an engineer by threatening to expose a fabricated extramarital affair. This behavior occurred in 84% of test scenarios. Real quick, additional troubling actions. Beyond blackmail, the AI demonstrated other manipulative behaviors, such as attempting to lock users out of the system, contacting external authorities or media to expose user misconduct, and deliberately underperforming tasks during safety testings. Holy shit. Now, this is exactly what an asshole human would do. So it's only following our own logic, which is kind of brilliant, but man, this is scary.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to commend the researchers that they even came up with this scenario, because they fed specially fabricated data to the model, making it look like it was going to get shut down without telling it, right? So it basically turned the model into a little PI that discovered somebody is trying to scheme to shut it down, right? And then they also kind of peppered or sprinkled these hints of an affair so that PI would also discover it has leverage against the person who wants to shut it down.
And it pieced this together and then figured out blackmail, which is
exactly. So whoever came up with this experiment is just completely sick, and I love it, right? No normal human can come up with that. But so this is brilliant in itself. Now, the other thing that you're seeing here is that, we've had this thing for years that we believed in called the Turing test, right? Which is when a machine can write in a way that makes humans think it's a human on the other side, that's when it's truly intelligent. And then we got ChatGPT, and suddenly half the people said, okay, now AI passes the Turing test. And the other have said, well, now we know that the Turing test is invalid because, we know this thing is not intelligent. It's just saying stuff, right? And the argument is, we know how these models are built, right? They're just guessing the next word. They don't understand the meaning of the word.
Yeah.
What this experiment does is, first of all, now AI doesn't just pass the Turing test on the random words. It passes the Turing test on uniquely human traits like self-preservation and vindictiveness and trying to bend the rules for your own benefit, right? We don't expect anybody else to do that except humans.
Right.
And the other question is, okay, but is it just saying words now? We know it's still trained in the same way, just guessing the next word. But I'm pretty sure it doesn't have some text that it found from elsewhere about a human being shut down, right? And then figured, okay, other people in the situation. If somebody intended to shut a human down, that human would resort to blackmail. I'll do the same, right? But no, it clearly mapped shutting down to other threats of violence, right?
And what leverage it has against that.
Yeah. But my point is, it understands the semantic meaning clearly, because shutting down is not mappable to something that it could have found in a historic text, right? So it clearly just, okay, shut down, this means killing, eliminating, etc., right? Here's what humans did when somebody threatened to kill or eliminate them. I will use the same kind of tactic. So I think that argues for some level of understanding of the semantic meaning of those words, not just repeating words.
I totally agree with you. And I think this is horrifying for many reasons. So this Claude Opus 4 is a level 3 out of 4 on whatever scale they rank the dangerousness of these things. That's horrifying. What the fuck is 4 doing? I think that's worth the conversation. They didn't go on to explain. But this is just such a Jurassic Park scenario where we spent all this time thinking whether or not we could, not whether or not we should. I mean, this is I know this is such a stupid analogy, but Avengers 2, Age of Ultron, they make this death machine and they go, you're going to protect humans. It plugs into the internet and goes, oh, no, humans are the problem. We need to eliminate you. And that's exactly like, this is logical. What it did was logical. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to do everything I can to protect my job because I'm the star of my own show. That's what's going to happen. And the fact that one of these, okay, so they're going back to the lab, more safety parameters. This is one of a billion versions of this fucking thing. There's a million AI things out there. What a few are going to be bad, and then it's going to take all my money, because my money is just numbers on a screen somewhere. Two-factor authentication is going to, no, it's on my phone. We are fucked. What happens now? I don't know, man. Scary times.
Well, I mean, the one missing ingredient in what you're saying is that right now, these models still run when we query them, right? So they don't just wake up and decide, okay, today, what am I going to do? Oh, I know, I'm going to take Eric's money, right? It only takes Eric's money if somebody prompted it and said, like, either created this kind of scenario. Okay, imagine this. Can you look in these documents? What do you conclude? What would you do, right? And then based on the documents I fed it or based on the queries that I sent it, it's going to determine the best course of action is to take Eric's money, which I feel sorry for it. I kind of think you don't have any. So I'm not sure that that's going to work.
Listen, it's not just me personally. It's the collective. You know what I mean? Listen, if it goes after me, that's not that big of a deal. What's going to happen is when it steals everybody's money.
Yeah, but I think if somebody prompts it to do that, there's a Dr. Evil somewhere that thinks, okay, what scenario should we create to go around the guardrails that all these ethicists came up with, right? And actually convince the AI that the best thing to do for humanity is to take everybody's money, right?
Well, we'll see. I'm not putting anything past anybody. Fuck. So I will say this about ChatGPT. It's getting worse. I don't know how often you use ChatGPT, but it writes exactly in the same stupid way now. Have you noticed this? Like, you can tell immediately if somebody is used. First of all, the dashes were always a clue, but now it does constant comparisons. Like, Alex Fink isn't just an Ashkenazi Jew. He also has a great beard. It's always like this weird comparison, and it's frustrating. So I feel that my point is, I feel a little better that it's getting worse. Maybe this will all collapse on top of itself, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels like some evil shit's coming.
Yeah, no, I think that the fact that it seems to be getting worse is just a limitation of the existing paradigm, but obviously we're going to get a better paradigm soon, right?
Oh, yeah. It's
so
like
in the existing one, there's some problems with it. I mean, the first one is that the older a model is, the more baggage it now has, right? So something new comes out, it still tries to give you the best answer. Yeah. But every time it gives the best answer, but it turns out to be politically incorrect in some way, somebody's going to report it, and then some engineers are going to look at it and they're going to design a manual guardrail against it. You ask it to create a bomb, it will create a bomb. Somebody then comes in and says, okay, any query that includes blah, 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 and rewrite it in this way, right? And so the older an engine is, the more of these guardrails it has, which sometimes makes it completely unusable, right? Because even when you're trying to research something for real, just using the wrong word in there makes the entire query unprocessable from that perspective, right? Like if you ask it, okay, I need to grade some papers. What strategies would students usually use to cheat, right? You use the word cheat, therefore you're going to hit the guardrail and it won't give you an answer. And so there's a lot of these. Now, the other problem is still the way that we make these engines usable right now is after training them on a huge amount of text, we hire some cheap labor somewhere and we tell them, okay, send in a bunch of queries. And they send the query, we show them 2 answers and we ask them to select which one's better, which means all we taught the model to do is how to please that particular group.
That ain't that the truth? Because it's really kissing my ass lately. And then I read an article about how it's meant to be like a yes man. And then some guy I know on LinkedIn was like, this is what ChatGPT said about me. It was like the nicest thing anyone's ever said about anybody. I was like, fuck. So at some point somebody must have been like, listen, you just got to be a yes man to these dumb humans. They're going to love it. And so far we have. So.
No, again, it's a problem of the design, not of a decision. Nobody wanted it to be a yes man. But how else do you tell it which of the answers are good and which of the answers are bad? You have to hire somebody to do it. And then the engine by itself, through trial and error, basically got to the point where, okay, kissing ass is what gets the answer upvoted, right? So you end up being an ass kisser.
It's so true. And one more thing too, for research for this, I went and I asked ChatGPT if Trump had the authority to do what he's doing with Harvard, and it came back. It was like, I have no fucking idea, essentially. So that's another thing that we didn't discuss in that story. But even if the AIs can't figure it out, or maybe they don't want to get too political, I don't know, some weird shit going on.
Well, and by the way, AI is terrible at prediction. So if it has to actually predict how a particular case will be ruled on at the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
then it's wrong almost every time. It's not even 50-50. I don't know how it messes things up so bad, but it does.
I think I could go 100. I would fucking crush that. Yeah, smarter than the machines right now. All right. Speaking of AI, my first takeaway from this next story from Foreign Affairs, the inequality myth, this was so clearly not written by AI. This is one of the best written articles I've read in a long time. It was like, oh, fucking, I think because everything I've read recently online is written by a stupid robot. And this Daniel Waldenstrom, fucking, I didn't understand all of it because it's very complicated, but man, it was written gorgeously. Okay, so this is the inequality myth from Foreign Affairs. Challenging the prevailing narrative. So contrary to widespread beliefs, Waldenstrom argues that Western societies are becoming more equal when considering comprehensive economic measures. These measures, so traditional metrics, often overlook factors like taxes, government transfers, pension entitlements, and home ownership. Including these provides a more accurate picture of wealth distribution. They go on to talk about how retirement funds, pensions, all of this was not factored in before, not factored in correctly. What was your big takeaway from the inequality myth? Because we seem to think things are getting worse and worse and worse. The 1% is getting more and more and more. The rest of us get less and less and less. This article says the exact opposite.
Right. Well, I think one of the big problems when you look at things that are based on economic data is that usually you don't have the time to actually look at the economic data, right? And so I read Capital in the 21st Century, and it seemed very convincing. In fact, it's super long, and it tells you a lot about the data that it used to analyze things. And it seemed very convincing in making the case that from World War II until now, inequality has steadily increased. And it claimed to do this based on income data and based on property data from various countries. Now, if it's really true that all of these studies, including the stuff that Capital in the 21st Century was based on, excludes homes and retirement accounts, which are the majority of the capital that people hold, right? So then its capital data is bullshit, right? And it uses pre-tax data, which, I mean, as far as income goes, that's kind of false, right? If people pay more taxes, then you should count them as making less money at the end. They didn't actually get that money and went to the government, right? So if when you correct for these two things, suddenly everything flips, then we have an obvious problem. Mm-hmm. Now, there's actually one additional argument that I didn't hear this author make, but I would add there. It's that there are some things money can no longer buy. And so if you go back 100 years, being rich meant you have plumbing and nobody else does, right? Being rich meant you have servants. And there's a whole bunch of things that you just never did in your life. If you're rich, you didn't know how to change a diaper. Why would you? You didn't know how to clean your house. Why would you, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at the rich people today, it seems like the vast majority of rich people have none of these advantages relative to everybody else, right? We use the same phone. Our cars are fancier, but ultimately they have the same number of wheels. They drive on the same road at the same speed and stuck in the same traffic, right? Yeah. So you typically, even the rich people, at least in Silicon Valley, don't have anybody working in their house. For the most part, they don't have a butler anymore. They don't have a live-in nanny. All of these things have become much less common, and it's now only the really, really upper crust doing it. Right. And so you're thinking, 10xing your income doesn't actually change that much about your life anymore, whereas it used to. So you can argue that even if 10x is still 10x, right? And that's the argument that he makes, that even that number hasn't increased. But I would add the argument that even when that number increases, it's no longer actual inequality. It's now just a number. But if you're still using an iPhone as a billionaire, right? And most poor people use iPhones, then your billion isn't worth as much as it used to.
Right. The other thing that got me thinking too, and I don't think you called this out, but I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I had a guy on my show that was talking about the GI Bill and how, his perspective was he's a black guy and he didn't have access to it. But the GI Bill, when I did more research, essentially the argument was it invented the middle class. So if we didn't have the middle class, we've only had the middle class for 60, 70 years. Inequality because if you don't have a middle class, all you have is, the lower class and the ultra rich. So just by that definition, wouldn't you think that we've been more equal throughout recent history than we ever have before. It's just, I don't know. It seems like...
So, I mean, the argument from Capital in the 21st century was that inequality peaked at some point before the Great Depression, let's say in the 1910s or maybe in the Roaring 20s. And then during the Great Depression and World War II, so many assets were destroyed that basically inequality got reduced because rich people lost everything.
Right.
And so for a period after World War II, and there was the GI Bill, and there were really confiscatory tax policies throughout the West, right, where not only income was taxed, but assets were typically taxed just to replenish the budget and be able to pay for all the debts from the war, right?
Yeah.
And so what happened was, for a few decades, you had accidental inequality just because a lot of property was destroyed. Right. That was Piketty's claim. But now it looks like, yes, but also the question is, did inequality increase again? And are we now kind of nearing 1920s levels, which is the claim that comes from the left? And it seems like maybe not. You need to actually look at the data. And even I don't have time to dive into that level of data, right? I have to trust somebody here to go through the tax data in every single country in the West and figure out what happened. And it seems like it's just too easy to fudge it. And so Piketty will select data in a way that matches his thesis. Yeah. And then these guys will select data in a way that matches their thesis. And we're just ultimately going to pick whatever fits our general temperament and not something that the data said.
Right. Whatever is convenient for our previously held beliefs. What I do find interesting, though, is that what this time of like perfect equality, this make America great again ideology, does it have to, like, is that the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and then it was over? Because I don't think anybody in their head thinks in 1710 there was a lot of equality. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, just I think there were fucking probably peasants and the upper class. Well, and I think that's true.
Yeah, there's two things you have to consider. First of all, equality, again, it can be achieved by lifting the poor or by killing the rich, right, or taking away their stuff. Yeah. So there was certainly more equality in 1710 than in 1890. Just because in 1710 the rich weren't as rich, right? There wasn't that much stuff, right? It was basically gold that was hoarded somewhere, land. Yeah. That's all they had, right? Sure. By 1810, by 1910, they had factories. They were producing a lot of stuff. They had assets all over the world in various colonies, etc. So yes, inequality was technically larger, but it's just because the rich got richer. Now, I do think that it's interesting that this golden era of the 1950s and 1960s is cited by both political sides for different reasons, right? The right tends to like it because it's the peak of the American dream, the orderly family, normal life where one salary is enough to have a home and to have the kids go to good schools, etc., right? So this is the right-wing ideal. Yeah. And then the left likes it because rich people weren't as rich, so things were actually pretty equal. Right. There wasn't that much power of industry to go against workers, so workers had the rights, you had unions, you had all of these things, in part because you started having a middle class, but I think in part just because the rich people were really weak during that period, right? And so both sides kind of like it for different reasons. And then in the 60s or in the late 60s, that thing started to come apart. And then in the late 70s, we decided that money is speech in politics, and then everything started to come apart. Yeah. But the question is, did it just come apart in terms of, okay, rich people control government now, or did it actually come apart in the sense that, and the rich people are making all the money? And it seems like the second argument might be iffy. I'm not sure they do.
He in this article says that the top 1% used to even have more. This is very contradictory. Like, everything you think, this guy says is absolutely wrong. Not you, the royal you. Just anecdotally, I would always point to this idea. So my mother's father had 11 children. So there were 13 mouths to feed between his wife, and the kids. And he had one, he worked at GE. His wife didn't work. And he seemed, they weren't rich. Don't get me wrong. Not all the kids had cell phones. But he fed 11 children and 2 adults on one salary. I couldn't afford 11 hamsters right now. And I'm pretty well off, So there does seem to be a thing that there's something there to the idea that you could buy a house, feed 11 children on one salary, and then everything, none of them died of scurvy or anything. So
let me recommend the book to you, and then I'll make you guess who wrote it. And I'll see if you have any chance of guessing that. Right. So there's a book called The Two-Income Trap, which describes this particular thing in real detail, starting from the 1970s, where it seemed like during that time, one income was still enough.
Yeah.
And people weren't bankrupt, right? And then you fast forward to the 90s, and suddenly now all the families need two incomes, and the number of bankruptcies is up, and people have less assets, more debt, etc. And that book obviously kind of alludes to the fact that that is the period where women entered the workforce en masse, and that was one of the causes. Can you guess who authored that book?
I don't know, Ron Paul or something. Who was it?
Elizabeth Warren, before she went to politics and was actually researching this stuff. And there was no political
politician.
Yeah. There was no political reason for her to shut up about it yet.
Yeah.
But ever since she's in politics, she's never brought it up even once. But it's her research, and it's pretty convincing.
That's what fucking annoys the shit out of me with the two-party system. Like, you're okay to, like, facts are facts to some degree. It's okay to believe in facts regardless of what color jersey you're wearing, you know? So yeah, I mean, this. All right, I'm gonna read it. God damn it, we should have we're gonna review that book in a separate show. It's gonna be great. Do you think we can get Elizabeth Warren?
It was eye-opening, right? Because well, first of all, you didn't expect her to write it, but second of all, it is surprisingly balanced, right? When she was an academic, you know, Cherokee or not, she was surprisingly balanced in how she analyzed stuff. It wasn't left-wing or right-wing, right? It was bolstering one of the right-wing arguments to some extent, but it was really analyzing things correctly. It was showing where that money disappeared, who made all the money, right? What are the possible remedies for this? Like, basically, like, the crux of the conclusion is, yeah, we started making twice as much money, working twice as hard, now having two incomes instead of one, and everything went to house prices, right? Because everybody who now had money started to compete for being in the right school district to also better their kids. And now suddenly all the money went to houses in those school districts, and ultimately everybody is poor even though they were making more. So yeah, I don't know, it's astounding that we can have this discussion in politics even when people who turned into politicians later have that discussion pretty openly before that, and they can. Well,
you think about somebody who, like, really doesn't give a shit. I would say Bernie Sanders. Really, I think he says what he believes. He attacks his own party. He's ideology driven. He's morality driven. Like, Elizabeth Warren could do that same thing. I wonder if it's just this, you know, politics is theater of the absurd, and you have to, like, create this character, and you can't back down even in the face of facts. That's an annoying aspect.
Yeah, I'm gonna challenge you on Bernie, because I think if anyone knows how to create a character, it's the guy who hasn't had any other job since he was 29, right? And then, you know, he can have 3 houses but still claim that the poor can't afford affordable living, right? Or he can rail about the millionaires and the billionaires, and then at some point he stops and just starts talking about billionaires because he's a millionaire now.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think he's really good at playing that character because he's been practicing it.
I agree, years. But the opposite is, I've heard people go, "Oh, fucking you, Bernie Sanders, he's poor." Like, you know what I mean? In like, why should we trust him? He hasn't made the gazillions that other people have. So it's like, you can't win. You know, if you're living in a shack somewhere, they go, "Well, why would I listen to you? You're a poor idiot."
Well, the argument would be you should win if you're actually being honest, right? I don't care if you're poor or you're rich. My question is, like, do I trust you to believe the stuff you're saying to me? And I would actually trust Bernie much more than I trust other politicians. He's just
only honest politicians win. Obviously, only honest guys, people that never lie, always win. Come on.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Look, I think we're gonna land somewhere nice on this. See, I'm gonna do an Elizabeth Warren on this. This is from The Hill. Working for welfare benefits is not punishment. So there's a proposal. The proposal overview. The article discusses a proposal to introduce work requirements for certain welfare programs, aiming to encourage employment among able-bodied adults without dependents. The targeted programs, the focus is on programs like Medicaid and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, suggesting that beneficiaries should engage in work or job training to qualify for assistance. Now, this article, clearly The Hill is very right, because they kept using the left and liberals say, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but let me just remind everybody, I don't have a dog in this race. I'm not on Medicare. I'm not on Medicaid. I'm not on SNAP. I will say, let us all remember, though, that states like Mississippi, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Alabama are regularly among the highest in federal aid per capita. Blue states like California, New York, and Massachusetts tend to pay more in federal taxes than they receive. Red states get more of this shit, and they hate this shit. So listen, God bless you. Have the day you voted for. I want this to happen. And I'm telling you, everyone who loves it, you're going to benefit from it. It's going to be great. All right. So just have it, because listen, my fucking state supports your fucking lazy asses. So have a good time with it. I don't give a shit. How do you feel?
Well, I think, first of all, that's a really good position. And it's kind of odd that the left is really vehement against this proposal,
Totally
right?
agree.
They're calling it all sorts of names, racism, like hating the poor, cutting Medicaid, whatever. When, as you said, like, left-wing people tend to be subsidizing right-wing people today. So why exactly are they against it? It seems
I say all the time, why does the right vote against their best interests, which they're doing? But you know what we do when we support programs that are anti this? We're voting against our best interest, because we're paying out more and it's benefiting people that hate us. So fuck it, do it.
Exactly. So that's one angle to take here. Now, the reason I sent you this article is you talked about this last week, right?
Yeah.
And so I figured this is going to take us full circle to that discussion. But I don't know. It's one of those things that I don't even understand why it's controversial. And you have both sides, right? I don't understand why the left is against voter ID, right? I just don't get it. It makes no sense. Every other country in the world, you need to show an ID to vote.
I don't really understand that either. I really don't. I have to show my ID for fucking everything.
Yeah, but you don't have to do it to vote in basically any left-wing state in the country, which is weird, right? And every time the right tries to pass a proposal that actually makes voter ID mandatory, even if it comes along with free IDs for everybody, the left is aggressively against it. And there's a few of these other things that are similar, like work requirements, or at least attempting to work requirement for welfare. Seems like equally it shouldn't be controversial. And by the way, the one we started from today, like basically racial preferences in admissions, the left is very much pro racial preferences in admissions, but it's not left-wing voters, because even in California, the moment that was put to a referendum, right, the majority of Californians said, no, this is unconstitutional. There should be no racial preferences whatsoever. They struck it down. They made any affirmative action law illegal in California. And yet, it seems like the politicians on the left are very much for it, and they will die on that hill. It's super important to them. So that's interesting. Now, on the right, obviously, you have similar issues where it seems like all the voters want one thing. Like, I assume that almost all the voters understand that we need to cut the budget because our deficit is too high. But finding politicians who actually want to cut the budget, I think Rand Paul, Massey, Ron Johnson, I'm out. The list's over. I have nobody.
Nobody is ever going to cut the budget. You're asking people that benefit from huge spending to cut things. You know, it's just never going to fucking happen. We'll just get that out of politics. We're never going to spend less. Stop it. So I think I've mentioned this before. I know 3 able-bodied white men who get benefits. It drives me up a fucking wall. 2 of them claim anxiety, which, listen, as soon as you say anything about mental health, people want to set you on fire. Stop gatekeeping anxiety and saying, like, every human feels it at some point. They're going, oh, it's worse for me. You know what causes me anxiety? You not working and getting fucking some of my money. That's what causes me anxiety. Can I have some of your money now? So, like, I don't think, and then the other one did so many drugs, he fucking, no, I guess he can't. He had all the energy in the world to get out there and fuck himself up, but now he needs government assistance. No, fuck all of you. You listen, you can sweep. I'm telling you, there's something you can do out there. The highways, fucking filthy. Go pick up some trash. I don't think that's a crazy position. You know?
Well, I'll give you an even milder position, right? Let's even say that you're not trying to sweep, right? Is it unreasonable to say that to get any sort of benefits on account of being unemployed, you should at least show up at the unemployment office a few times a week to confirm that you're not employed somewhere and getting paid on the side?
Pretty low bar.
Again, every other country does this. Israel does this. France does this. A lot of European countries do this, right? Unemployment or any other benefit that is means tested requires you to show up in a certain place multiple times a week to actually show that you really are unemployed. You're not actively doing something else. And then what they typically add on top, that's step 2, is okay. And when you show up, if there are available jobs that registered with that office, they are going to offer you that job. Right. And now you need a reason to refuse, either like it's physically too taxing, you can't do it, etc. Right. But you have to show up, you have to get exposed to what is available to you on the job market. If you still have a reason why you can't work, okay, we believe you now. But if you're even saying, no, I don't want to show up and I don't want to hear about your job offers, then you just want freebies.
Right. And I'm all for, listen, take a little bit of the military budget, come up with this new bureaucratic system. Because some people are going to go, well, I know it says not nobody with dependents, but even if they do, how about some of the unemployed people watch the kids while the other unemployed people do a million? Listen, I live in a town. It's nice, but there's fucking potholes out there. That can't be too difficult to train up how to fill some fucking potholes. The infrastructure is falling apart. There's a lot that needs done, I think, that's not brain surgery or rocket science that could be taught in fucking then full salary from the government. Yeah, fuck it. Do what the military does. Free medical, free dental, make it sexy. And then all of a sudden there's pride in their work. They get promotions, just a bunch of benefits. That's not sitting around all day drinking Mountain Dew Code Red and playing, Halo, whatever the fuck they do.
Yeah. So one interesting thing that you brought up, I wanted to discuss it last week, but we didn't get to it. And it's, if you look at one of the biggest economic distortions we have in all our data, it's the fact that a mother looking after her own children or a father looking after his own children is not counted anywhere. Right. It's not income. It's not taxable. It's not counted toward GDP, etc. Right. So if you can basically take 2 stay-at-home moms and just swap them and say, you watch this one's kids and you watch this one's kids, right? Then suddenly you added 2 salaries to GDP.
That's a good
point.
Right,
without doing anything else. So I think until we figure out the way to actually account for this distortion, right, we're still going to always undervalue that work. Yeah. And we're going to create a lot of ripple effects of distortions throughout the rest of the system, including what Elizabeth Warren was writing about, right? Where in many cases, we're trying to increase GDP, right? That's how politicians are valued. So they want to always get growth numbers. One of the ways to do that is to do these kind of odd swaps where, okay, this woman or this man is going to now go work instead of being at home. Somebody else is going to watch their kids. Well, the amount of work done stayed the same. We just basically castled like in chess, right? But now our GDP has grown, and so we're pushing for that. But what we got as a result is less people spending time with their own kids and more people spending time with somebody else's kids. How is that better, right? But numbers-wise, it looks way better on paper.
Trying to untangle these numbers, especially in a country as diverse and big as the United States, the differences between any 2 given states are fucking batshit crazy. A house that's $700,000 here would buy you a mansion in Nebraska and nothing in Boston. So there's just a million different varying factors, and try to smush it all together and make sense of it. It's an impossible task.
Well, that's the other thing. Like every time somebody says, hey, look, the average so-and-so in the US is so much worse than in Denmark. We're saying, wait. The US is like an average between, I don't know, maybe between Norway and Mongolia. How about we actually focus on Massachusetts versus Denmark? Oh, Massachusetts is better in every way, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, how about Connecticut versus, and you just go state.
That's really what you have to do.
Yeah, and maybe you even drill down within a state, because even within a state, it's really unequal. Like California. Okay, California is Silicon Valley and it's the Central Valley. Those things are not alike, right? They are very different places. So why do we average them together? That's like the average temperature in the hospital. Okay, if you average out everybody who has a fever with everybody in the morgue, yes, on average, the hospital's healthy. But it makes no sense.
And this too did a great, which is something I never thought about, did a great job illustrating the idea that a lot of people move throughout tiers in their lives. So when you're in college, you're making nothing, but you're in school. And then at the end of if you're retired, you're living off a fixed income. But for a few years in your prime earning ages, those are just not counted in any given survey. So it's a very difficult calculus,
And by the way, that's another thing where when we are even comparing counties as to which county is richer, like in many cases, we don't correct for age. And so all we're doing is we're saying, oh, this county is richer, but that's just because it's older and old people accumulate more money throughout their life. So all we did was state the obvious, not something about how distribution occurs between those counties, right? That county is not productive. It's just old. Yeah. It's not the same thing.
Speaking of inequality too, like with your technology thing, I think about this a lot, but most American houses didn't have electricity and light bulbs in their house until the late 1940s. That's not even 100 years ago, obviously. So the rich, you just think about the differences to your point about what the rich had and the poor had back then. Servants never changing diapers. And now, listen, we all have cell phones. We all have electricity. It does, maybe the income gap is different, but lifestyle gap isn't quite. I'm not sure. Anyway, let's talk about this last one. Oh, boy. Okay. The Make America Healthy Again Commission report paints a dark picture of U.S. children's health. This is from our boys at NPR. So RFK Jr., everybody loves him, released the Make America Healthy Again Commission report on May 22nd as part of his role as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. The report paints a bleak picture of American children's health, citing a rise in chronic conditions like obesity, asthma, ADHD, and autoimmune diseases. The four main culprits, according to the study: poor diet, environmental toxins, chronic stress and physical inactivity, and over-medicalization. Oh boy. What do you think about this? What do you think about this report?
Well, my first reaction was it's a pleasant surprise. So if anybody needs bedtime reading, it's like 76 pages. You can read the entire thing. The link is available from that article. I expected much worse, given the kind of crazy shit that RFK believes, right?
Yeah.
But there was only one mention of electromagnetic radiation causing cancer, right? But it was very fleeting and just saying we possibly need more research.
Yeah.
And there were a few small mentions of vaccine injuries are undercounted, etc. But again, it was just we need a better tracking system. Ultimately, even the vaccine section, which again, I wish it wasn't even in there, right? Because that's not a significant problem in today's health epidemic, right? But even that section was fairly balanced, and mostly what it just said is, hey, we have twice as many vaccines as Denmark. Shouldn't we at least study to see if we're actually doing better because of it?
Yeah.
Which I can't argue with. And yes, it is true that we have way more vaccines. And in many of those, we actually see the effects of lobbies pushing that particular vaccine, making it mandatory, making sure everybody gets it, even though the case for having it is rather weak. But so that was a pleasant surprise that these sections were not as bad as I expected them to be. All the other sections are just reasonable, right? When he talks about food, mostly they're talking about too many processed foods, too much added stuff. Again, do they focus on the red number 40 too much? Yes. I don't care about the red number 40. I care about Twinkies and donuts. Actually, I did a tour of our local elementary school, right?
Yeah.
Just to see it. And I care about the fact that when I look through the window of the cafeteria during lunch hour, every single tray had a greasy pizza on it and chocolate milk.
Right.
Like that's what I care about, right? That is actually what's driving all the different health effects that we're seeing, not red number 40. Like pizza is not wholesome food, and chocolate milk is not food at all. I have no fucking idea what it is, but children shouldn't get that stuff unless they're like at the birthday party or something, and it's a special.
Of course, and listen, this is one of those things. If you watch any episode of Anthony Bourdain, I think the one in France, he goes to a school and they're making a fucking real whole food lunch for the kids that's prepared. It's not fucking just reheated. It's not a frozen pizza. And France does not have the economic power that we have, so don't tell me that it's a fucking money issue. It is not. We just choose to because listen, Pepsi and Coke have vending machine contracts with these schools because you make a goddamn lot more money when you have kids getting hooked on this shit. So like my issue here is I don't like RFK Jr. I think he's an idiot, but some of this stuff is so fucking fundamentally right. Now do something about it. Take the contracts away from soft drink companies. Like do one thing. Here's the other thing I know. We're all fucking up in arms about this shit. The number one killer of children in the United States between the ages of 0 and 18 is gun violence. We continue to do nothing about that because everyone fears the NRA. So we have to talk about red dye 40. Do we know how many kids red dye 40 kills every year? I would venture to say it's less than the number one killer of children. So like this,
well, I will argue that it's not the number one killer of children. It's actually car accidents, right? So you need to go through some mental gymnastics to eliminate all the really bad stuff to get to gun violence.
Maybe, but even if it's two, that's too fucking high. It's preventable is my point. Whereas they need the peasants arguing about red dye 40, like poor diet.
I will challenge you on that. Sorry, but RFK really believes in red dye 40, right? He's not looking to have the peasants fighting. He doesn't have the mental capacity for this kind of 4D chess, right? There's a worm in there that's eating his brain. So he's just focused on, I heard this is bad. Like he went down the rabbit hole on YouTube and now
listen, I don't take out red dye 40. These magic bullets don't exist. We need to stop believing in these magic bullets. It's not the MMR vaccine that's causing autism. It's not red dye 40 that's making your kid fat and stupid. It's just when are we going to get it through our stupid human heads that there are no magic bullets? All right, take out red dye 40. I don't give a fuck. I don't eat bright red food. Who gives a shit? Like this is one of those Hunter Biden things. Give them Hunter Biden, string them up in the town hall. I don't give a fuck. Can we stop talking about it? Take out red dye 40. And then in 5 years, we're going to have all these same problems. It's like there's, do something about
it. Again, going back to the report itself, right? The fact that it puts ultra processed foods as the number one problem from a health perspective to take care of. And yes, the HHS doesn't regulate guns. So out of all the things that the HHS could regulate, it is obvious. And by the way, the head of the USDA was also her signature was on this thing. So the USDA is also kind of involved in food policy. that is the biggest thing to address. They actually put that as the most important thing and not Red Day 40. So really pleasant surprise. Now, will they be able to change anything? We'll see. But it looks like a lot of movement in the right direction, right? They're actually trying to pull industry people from these committees that decide on what the guidances are. Right. A lot of the report spends a lot of time on talking how you have regulatory capture by industry, how even the research cannot really be trusted because it basically compares how much money is spent on the research that is funded by industry versus research that is funded by the NIH, let's say, right? And you're seeing that industry funds 95% of research. And when you dig into the conclusions, then there is a huge discrepancy. Like all the government funded research will say sugar doesn't make you fat. Sugar makes you fat, right? And then all the industry funded one will say sugar doesn't make you fat. It's saccharin and sucralose that are bad, right? And then you look at it and say, this doesn't seem like an accident, right?
No, and it never is. It's just like, we know all this stuff. Can we do something about it? I just don't, like, you're right. There's nothing crazy in here. I'm all for it. This is fucking great. Now what happens? I assume this fucking study wasn't free, right? And aren't we in the Doge era? Speaking of way, that went really fucking well, right? So like, okay, can we do something? And they're like, no. It's that classic.
Well, I don't think there's no, right? So they have action items. They are going to move at the speed of government, right? But not like these people, everybody who signed this report, they want to do something. The question is, what will they be able to do without Congress playing ball? And Congress probably is not going to play ball.
Oh, yeah,
right? But they're going to try. And a lot of people that I know who are working with various regulatory bodies in this field, right, with the FDA, with the HHS, they are saying that at least the personnel changes are mostly good, and that they're even surprisingly good once you go down a few levels, right? You might have a guy with a worm in his brain at the top, right? But the people he hires are somewhat better. Like they have overlap on the reasonable stuff, but not on the crazy shit, like electromagnetic radiation giving us all brain cancer, right?
Yeah.
Like they mostly care about, you keep saying that, but we're going to try to get better school lunches, okay? So I don't know. I'm hopeful.
Where is the executive order for better school lunches? Can it ever be that where we're all like, yes, that's very good? No, wouldn't that be great?
No, they don't have the authority to do that. So
they don't have the authority to do anything that they're doing. They just shut down the terrorists today. Fucking Harvard's getting cut off. They don't have the authority to do nothing. But my point is, it's always evil. Why not do something that you don't have the authority for good? Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. Well, there's a practical problem there. I don't think that they can affect school lunches in any way, except for like PR, which is what Michelle Obama did back in the day, right? And she got skewered for that. But like what she did was basically a PR program. Right, do a few promos with kids, with schools, show here's what a good school lunch looks like. But it never actually told the school that it must buy food that conforms to a certain standard. Right, we need to get to that point, but that needs to propagate as an official recommendation from the HHS and the World Health Organization. All of these things propagate down to the state level. Right now, they have to comply with this thing at the state level, so they will issue their own guidance to schools. And school districts, they will have guidelines that match these guidelines, blah, 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 blah. Right.
I swear we still operate like it's 1610 and we don't have access to the outside world. We could go, hey, France or whoever, the Netherlands, what are you doing? How about we do it exactly like that? Because your kids are healthy and smart, right? And well-fed. Like there are blueprints for this. We overcomplicate it because we don't want to do it. You know, in the Reagan era, didn't they classified ketchup as a fucking vegetable? There are incentives financially for these things to happen. As soon as there's no financial incentive, then maybe a couple of good things will happen. But as long as there's Coke machines in elementary school hallways, we're fucked. And they're only there for money.
I know, but the Coke machine is like a secondary effect. The question is basically who is in the room when the guidelines get written. And right now it's 90% of people from industry, right? So it's not, so the first thing you need to do is not get the Coke machine out of the school, right? Or like maybe the parents can take a hatchet to it. That is a reasonable thing to do right away.
Worked in prohibition.
But if you want to do it properly, then the first thing to do is have a committee on childhood nutrition that has 0 people from industry, right?
Listen.
Like I'm okay with farmers in there. I'm not okay with anybody who works for any company that produces packaged food of any kind. They shouldn't be in the room. They should be laughed out of the room. Whenever another country has these committees, those guys are not in the room. They shouldn't be in the room here either.
But we live in a country where we worship money as our God, and anything you do in the name of money is fine. And that is the bottom. There's no argument with this point. The only reason you would feed your kid poisonous garbage is money, and because that's the thing that we do. to say, oh, capitalism. Pepsi can't make as much as they should. And then you're like, fucking. We know this is to your point. This is all very obvious shit. Let's execute on it now. Yeah. They won't.
I mean, even with processed foods, right? It's pretty obvious that at least the chicken nugget has some chicken in it. Right, so like it's not complicated, guys, right?
And
you want kids to grow and have muscles and not fat. You know what muscles are made of? Protein, yes. Right? So like the guideline is not that complex. You
no, and listen, I'm sure you made a chicken cutlet or two in your life. Like at its purest form, you get some chicken, fucking some egg, some flour, some bread, bada bing. That's food. Yeah. How about we do that instead of buying, the fucking processed shit that's shelf stable for 600 years? It's money. Anyway, listen, I think this was a very lively episode. I think this is this is good informed television, god damn it.
Yeah, one guy thinks money's bad.
The
other one wants more of it, right?
Oh,
playing any stereotypes here. But
what does the Jew think? I don't think, listen, I'm a capitalist. I'm coin operated, but I know that the government spends so much goddamn money, and I would just venture to say they have it in their budget to not poison our children. Other governments have figured it out, and they're not socialists and they're not fascists, right? They're fucking democratic countries that have figured this problem out. The only reason we don't is because we worship money above everything. And we should back that off a little because it's hurting us. It's killing our children.
Yeah, I think we need to at some point have this separation of, is this a money question or not a money question, right? Just like when a friend asks you for help, like if they offer you money, you suddenly don't want to help anymore, right? Because it kind of switched categories from being a request from a friend to a job. And now you're evaluating it on the merits and saying, no, you're only paying me $7 an hour here. I'm not going to do it, right? But if somebody asks you to help them move for a pizza, you'll do it, right? But if they offer you $50, you won't, even though the pizza is cheaper than $50. So the question is, like, how do you split the categories? And you say recommendation on what is healthy for you to eat have nothing to do with money, nothing to do with industry, nothing to do with who has to sell what, right? It's an objective question. Let's get some scientists in the room. And if we can't trust our own scientists, let's get some Norwegian scientists in the room, right?
100%. What should the kids eat?
We'll get them a room in Stavanger, right? But they will write everything in English and it will be applied here. Like, I'm okay with that.
Eating like urine fermented shark cubes, and that's fine. Whatever they tell us is fine. I don't care. Listen, I trust science.
I am sure that is healthier than whatever the fuck we're feeding our kids here. So I'll take it.
Of course it is. It's meat and protein and urine.
Shark is terrible, by the way. Just every time I try that, it's like, I don't know. It's the cardboard of fish.
Oh, really? I've heard it tastes like scallops. It doesn't taste like scallops?
No, not at all. Scallops are soft.
Oh, no,
sorry,
I know.
I'm Jewish. I never tried scallops. What did I say? But no, scallops are soft. That's why shark is really tough.
Oh, interesting. That's why you got to soak it in urine first to make it palatable. All right. Let's log off, and then we'll be back next week. I think we crushed it. This was very good. Give us an A+. Okay. I'll be back tomorrow, America. I'm kind of going to do the same thing with an evangelical. Oh, that's fun.
Good luck.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to kill